Marcos Rivera, author, entrepreneur, and pricing coach. And today we're going to talk about Unity and the pricing change they announced, or better yet, the disaster pricing change they announced. This thing was met with a ton of blowback. I got to talk about it and unpack it. I'm also going to give you 3 ways to avoid the mistakes that they made. Unity is a pretty popular video game engine platform, very active developer community, lots of games, lots of downloads, and they've built a lot of goodwill over the years. In the beginning, just to rewind a little bit, the CEO and the Unity company really try to make things transparent with developers. They promise never to introduce any royalties or anything that will break their trust. And then here they go, dropping this bomb, changing their pricing model, which was pretty simple beforehand. You got a free tier. You could also pay by the seat. And now they're shifting to this new model where they're paying by the install of the application. Remember, some games can be downloaded and installed by millions, right? So think about when you charge on a fee like that, the fear that a developer has that, now when I have a hugely successful game, all of a sudden I'm going to have to pay this huge amount of royalty over to Unity. So that was where a lot of the blowback came from, is this model felt like a very big departure from everything Unity promised and was about from the get-go. A lot of the developer community felt betrayed. They honestly felt like they were lied to. This was a dramatic shift. But one of them here talked a little bit about lack of clarity, loss of trust, in a naked attempt to squeeze money out of small developers. And it's really an emotional, visceral reaction to this. I always say when you're rolling out a pricing change, the emotional part of it can really play in. And so how you roll it out is just as important as how much you're changing the pricing. And again, this was a pretty big departure. Free tier and seats all the way to this threshold and a scale and charging per install, no matter what the install was about. But nobody cared. Nobody cared, right? Just by the shift of the model, the betrayal of what they were promised as developers from the beginning, transparency, trust, no royalties, they weren't having it. They really were revolting. They were threatening to take all their games off the platform. I have one developer quote here: "We are heavily considering taking all of our games off of Unity. I fucking hate it here." That's a quote. And you do not want your community saying that. And so all of this festered and really could have been avoided. And here are 3 things that you can do to avoid this type of blowback from a pricing change, especially if you have an active community. So number 1, it sounds like they didn't even sit down and talk to those developers. Okay, active communities, they talk, they share, they are very opinionated, and they're always willing to tell you what they think. So even just a couple of focused groups that step through a little bit about the pricing today, what do they like about it? What do they not like about it? Where is it confusing? And maybe introduce some structural changes. Hey, here are 4 areas where if we were to charge or bill you by this, how would that feel? What would be acceptable? What would be problematic? And just try to get a sense for the hot buttons and sensitive areas within the pricing structure and mechanics. You don't need to get into any numbers. The second thing I would do, once you start getting some of that input and get a sense for what's going on, I would run a test of the new pricing mechanics. And this is especially if you're introducing a new bundle, if you're introducing a new way to charge and bill for something that could dramatically change their fees. You want to test it out. So if I were them and say the focus groups were fine by charging per install as long as the installs were activated and maybe paying, then perhaps I would then introduce a plan as a trial or a test that has that metric in it. So leave your plans still, but introduce a new test plan and see how some of the folks who buy that react to the new pricing metric. And if there's a threshold around the installs that start to become problematic, or no matter what, whether the plan is leaner or more robust, nobody goes there because they don't like the metric, that should clue you in on where that metric could fall short. The third one I would consider, before rolling it out, you always want to prime the value before you change the price. And what I mean by that is folks get used to using your tool, your solution. They build muscle memory around it. And generally, they really don't think about the value. They just kind of want it and do it. And so you kind of have to bring that back to the forefront. Remind them of all the great updates you made to the platform, all the new things you introduced, even things that aren't in the platform. Maybe you've extended your customer service from 5 days a week to 24/7. All those things do matter in giving them a better experience. So prime that value all the way up. And then from there, you want to introduce a little bit more on why you're changing pricing, right? Because the first thing folks are going to think is this is just a money grab from a greedy company. And you don't want them to think that. Most oftentimes, you're just aligning price to value, capturing the value you deserve, and you take that additional value. And what do? You hire people, you invest it in R&D, you do other things. And so the idea here is, how does this change get you closer to your mission? All right, so announce that. How your change gets you closer to the mission, and the additional revenue is going to be put to great things that are going to benefit them ultimately. If you do those three things, then you would have a much higher chance of success in rolling out the model than these guys did. Take the lesson. If you're considering a pricing change right away, do those three things. Focus groups, get the opinions. Number 2, test it with a plan. Number 3, prime that value story and make sure that everybody understands the reasoning. And that's the word on the street. If you want more of these videos, give me a like, subscribe, and I'll see you again next time.